West Ham, of course, you were there recently. The club holds a very dear place in your heart. West Ham host Wolves. Saturday 5:30 on that one. We spoke about this week, about David Moyes.
Yeah.
Is he under any degree of pressure? Because it hasn't been the start that they would have wished at West Ham United. And the hierarchy sent out a message, absolutely not. You're kidding. After what this man has done, he'll be given time. Having said that, reports began to surface that David Moyes is under a bit of pressure to provide something of a turnaround, or maybe over the next 4 games face something of a fight, Stuart, to save his job. I mean, how does Moyes continue to hit the high standards that he has set with West Ham in recent season?
Well, his sheer work ethic will keep driving the club forward, you know. To actually be on the ground with him and watch him work is quite incredible. I think West Ham as a football club are probably at the most stable period they've got for many, many years. I really do, both with the manager, the coaching staff, the group of players they've got, the investment that they've made in 7 new players, I think it is, coming in. They'll take a little bit of time to settle in. And I think the board of directors and the fans are all on side with it. You know, I listened to the show the other day when you were speaking of West Ham. And to be fair, for me, there was a lot of good, solid feedback from the West Ham fans. You know, saying, look, we've got a good manager in place. It will just take a little bit of time. They've got a European campaign that they're working on and playing Thursdays, Sundays. I think the last 2 years, the team had been absolutely incredibly punching way above their weight potentially.
Yeah.
It needed to buff the squad out and bring players into the squad that were going to give it a lift. That takes time to settle in.
I mean, I must say, Stuart, the other day you'd expect it. There was the odd grumble. There was the odd fan. You heard it. You listened to it. I mean, as I say, we spoke to the hierarchy before we went on, and they said, "Look, the guy's given us so much."
Yeah.
And he said, and the message has come over. David Moyes has plenty of credit in the bank.
Yeah. And to be fair, I think his relationship with David Sullivan and Karen Brady is really solid. So I don't see any problems there. I've seen it from the inside. I know how solid the foundations are at West Ham now, and the fan base as well are right behind the manager. But make no mistake, it's a big game tomorrow night at 5:30 for West Ham. They're playing fourth bottom Wolverhampton. They've got an opportunity to move up a few places in the division with, I think, Fulham at home next week, if I'm not mistaken, is their next fixture as well. So all of a sudden, the turnaround can be really, you know, a couple of victories. All of a sudden, you're in the top half of the division.
I mean, I remember David Moyes when he played for Celtic in Glasgow, of course, and I've known him for years, but I certainly couldn't claim to know him as well as you do, because you've worked with him very closely. How will he be handling this inside? What is it?
I think he's so internally driven and puts so much pressure on himself to achieve. It's incredible. I mean, I really enjoyed my time being alongside him, probably, you know, putting a level tilt on some of the pressures, and he can be negative on himself and beat himself up because he's set his standards that high, and sometimes you have to, as a staff member around him, put things into context a little bit with him because his standards are that high as an individual. But listen, From a tactical point of view as well, he's very, very good. He probably doesn't get the credit that he actually deserves as a tactician, as a manager. I've seen it firsthand, and in all honesty, I thought, having looked at him studying the game and the tactical side of it, I was a complete amateur as a manager. You know, when I compare myself to someone of his ilk that's got anyone.
Seriously, Stuart, you would say that
100%.
You were poles apart to what he's like.
100%. Listen, this fella's managed over 1,000 football matches. There's only a few people. There's a handful of people in football that have managed 1,000 matches as a manager. David Moyes is one of them, and you have to revere anybody that's been in the game that long.
It's interesting because when you see how he sort of, in the latter years, until this season, he was sort of getting even better, wasn't he, as a manager?
Yeah.
And maturing, developing. His wide players were no longer rigid. I like the way the two wide players would, whether it's Ben Rama or Bowen, would move in off the lines and create extra numbers. That central player, Antonio, making. But, you know, when making the next step now, they lost 5 games this season.
Yeah.
And it is, obviously, we talk about bumps in the road. This is a big one. And it's like, well, these new acquisitions, how many of those, you know, are really good enough to take the first team places away from the Fornows and the Bowens and the Antonios? Is it about the recruitment that takes them to the next level? Because we know Rice Souček in midfield. I mean, that's the engine room, isn't it? I've seen Kehrer come in at central defence. I'm not completely certain.
A lot of the West Ham fans the other day, Stuart, were saying, why does he persist with Souček? We know he loves him. We know the club obviously has benefited because of his arrival and what he's given them. But in recent times, Moyes has been maybe too loyal to Souček.
Yeah, potentially. But, I mean, the bottom line is, when you look at, he brought Thomas in a year and a half ago when the team were flat to the boards, and Thomas has been brilliant. He's so far in credit at West Ham, the same with Vladimir, and the character that they offer around the place as well, which is something probably the outsiders don't see. Their professionalism, the games that they run out, all of those type of things. Now, we're at a juncture at the moment at West Ham where probably we've gone out and invested, and the owners have been brilliant. You know, some of the fans at times have said the owners have not backed the manager. Well, I can assure you they have now. Yeah, with the investment that they've put in this year.
And these players are top internationals, aren't they? Kehra's playing in the German national team with Brazilians in there. You've got an Italian in there.
Sure. Martin, what about Wolves? Bruno Lage's record over the last 14 Premier League games, worse than Rodgers, worse than Gerrard. And he's had 100 million to spend. So, I mean, are they stalling? They've stood still.
Well, I mean, as you know, Stuart's saying, 17th versus 18th in the table. You know, it's been a really poor start for them also. And finding he moved away, didn't he, from that back five, and Connor Cody was a victim of that. Went off to Everton, and they've gone with a back four, and it hasn't really been completely convincing, Jim. So, you know, you talk about managers under pressure. Yeah, I mean, this again is a huge game.
Diego Costa, is he going to be the answer to their goal scoring woes?
Well, they need that. You know, Jimenez has been injured of late. And not quite the same again this season, and they're looking for that rhythm, Jim. They're still going with Neves and Moutinho in the midfield, and Nunes has come in. Is he an upgrade? I'm not really sure, but it's a manager that wants to change from a back five to a back four, and at the moment I don't think it's quite working for them.
I think as well, what you've got to understand, you can't just look at teams and say, right, 7 games in, they've done this, they've done that. Have a good look about how they've played and who they've played. It's really important. Yeah. Wolverhampton have played quite well and been on the reverse of a 1-0 away at Tottenham, I think it was, you know, where they played very well and deserved at least a point, probably more. And I think that's been the case.
Every game they've been in is tight, really. They lost 3-0 to City.
Yeah, to Manchester City. Exactly. Look at the fixtures they played. Some of these teams that, in Wolverhampton's case, definitely, in West Ham's case, potentially as well, but they've been involved at the start of the season in qualification to get in the conference group stages, those games on Thursdays, and they've also, first game of the season, you've got Man City at home, drop out the hat.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah. Never easy.
No,
you know what I mean?
And
and probably, you know, they played a couple of games against the blue chip teams in West Ham's case and in Wolverhampton's case.
Do you know, Stuart, after an international break, if there's 2 clubs that both need a win and they go against each other, it's West Ham and it's Wolves.
Definitely.
They both desperately need a win.
And it's Forest and it's Leicester.
And it's Forest and it's
Leicester. That's
Leicester.
why it's such a critical weekend.
You sat on the fence, Mr. Pearce, about Forest Leicester. Go on, pick me one. West Ham, Wolves.
West Ham.
West Ham.
I think the home advantage after international football is really important as well. We don't want to be travelling away, get everyone together. Take advantage of that home.
Wonder if we'll see Diego Costa. Wonder how he is. Wonder if he's changed. Yeah, right. 1:45.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.